of the law to grab a search warrant to then go search his house. So here's the opinion of the Supreme Court. Ruled on 5-4 that the thermal imaging of Kylo's home constituted a search. Since the police did not have a warrant when they used the device, which was not commonly available to the public, the search was presumptively unreasonable and therefore unconstitutional. The majority opinion argued that the person had expected privacy in his or her home, and therefore the government cannot conduct unreasonable searches even with the technology that does not enter the home. Yes. You.
So, but like, arguably, wouldn't advanced hacking and internet monitoring be commonly available to the public?
No.
More and more people with computer knowledge?
Honestly, there's more and more people with computer knowledge, but that more and more is growing from like 0.006% of the population to 0.1% of the population. So it's a very, very infinitesimal growth of hackers, which means like general public has to mean like 1 in 5. Like 20% of the population has to have access to a device. Yes.
So what happens when the Supreme Court forces whoever's prosecuting Kylo to throw out all this evidence about marijuana? Is he like in his house trying to move?
Basically, yeah. Like he's allowed to grow pot. Like that's basically the end of the court's decision. Like it's really, really arbitrary because sometimes this will happen. They'll throw the case out of court, which means he can go back home, and then the police can then use the evidence found in that court case as evidence to then go convict him of growing marijuana. So the court kind of has a double bind. Like, we're not going to fine you for this, and we'll pay your lawyer's fees, but you still were growing pot, which means we get to convict you still because it was a crime. Yeah.
So it really doesn't do a lot. They can just release them and then prosecute them again.
Well, it does a lot for subsequent cases. That means it kind of is a slap on the hand of the police to be like, you guys can't ever use thermal imaging again to constitute like a search of the home. And if you do, then we'll bust your behind. It's like, that's kind of what they tell the police, you know. So yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just pointing out that as technology gets better and as technology grows, more commonly used, so, and as hackers get more prevalent, so will the securities on
Right.
networks.
Exactly.
It'll be harder and harder to hack.
Very true. United States versus Jones. This one was fun. Did the warrantless use of a tracking device on Jones's vehicle to monitor its movements on public streets violate Joe's Fourth Amendment rights? Classic question.
Why are 90% of these cases about drugs?
Because that's where the police do a lot of surveillance to find out is drug busts and stuff. Let's see. Yes. They completely reversed themselves. They said public thoroughfare GPS tracking totally fine, and then Justice Scalia, who is like the intellectual Arnold Schwarzenegger of the Supreme Court, like totally came and reversed his opinion. I love Justice Scalia. Like I was able to watch him in an oral argument once. Justice Thomas, who is the African American justice on the court, he puts on these big old shades so nobody can see his eyes, and then he just leans back and goes to sleep. Like he's never talked in an oral argument like in the last like 5 to 6 years. It's really funny. And Justice Scalia, his mind is like a razor blade. Like he'll just take attorneys and like rip their hearts out and then put them back at the stand and be like, haha, you're funny. And like the rest of the court will be like, yeah, dude, you just got owned. Like, sit down, son. So he's like the intellectual bodybuilder of the Supreme Court. He's amazing. The first time he got a B in high school, he wandered the streets aimlessly for 5 hours. Like, because he was so disappointed with himself. The first time he got a B. He got a straight 4.0 in law school, which is like insane, if not impossible. Like the dude is like, yeah. Anyway, that's a rabbit trail. Okay, going on. The court affirmed the judgment of the lower court and held that the installation of a GPS tracker device on Jones's vehicle without a warrant constituted an unlawful search under the Fourth Amendment. The court rejected the government's argument that there is no reasonable expectation of privacy in a person's movements on public thoroughfares and emphasized that the Fourth Amendment provided some protection for trespass onto personal property. So there you go, is your question about cars. Trespass onto personal property. So that's where Justice Sotomayor agreed with him on that one, which is really, never has to happen. Scalia and Sotomayor never agree. All right. Florida versus Hardinez. Oh, yeah.
There was that previous case also about tracking devices, and they were saying that tracking devices, if it's
Right.
for the sale of the car,
Right.
does that still apply for this case?
Yep. All of the cases apply to each other and negate each other.
Yeah, like
They all have to exist concurrently in order for them to coexist, yeah.
The USB not said if you travel in public places, the government can track you with it.
Exactly.
USB Jones said if you travel in a public place,
Mm-hmm.
can't track you with it.
Yes. That's exactly. Like, can the government track you on a public thoroughfare even though the Supreme Court has said otherwise? Yes. Like, the government's going to do what it wants, and the Supreme Court has ruled in their favor once, which means now the government is empowered. However, if the case goes to court, there's a likely decision that the Supreme Court will reverse itself again because the new case will have new facts, and somebody will probably argue from USB knots. So you just don't know with the Supreme Court. And honestly, the Supreme Court justices get a lot of time to sit down and think about this. Like, when Justice Scalia sits down to his morning bowl of, Wheaties and reads the paper and with his glass of orange juice, he gets to, look at what issues are going on. He doesn't get to say, President Obama, if he sits down with his bowl of, Lucky Charms and his glass of orange juice, he gets to look at something in the morning paper and be like, I want to change that today. Somebody give me a pen and a cell phone. Whereas, Justice Scalia gets to sit there and he's like, man, it's going to be 2 years before I get to, even decide anything on that. Because everything takes so long in the court system. Yeah.
So how drug is in the debate round? Because they both
You would argue persuasively from precedent. You can say, look, the Supreme Court of now has the best view on what today's culture is like. They have the best information for how we can decide what to do with today. They also know that the Supreme Court is the #1 person that hates the government. Literally, everybody on the Supreme Court hates the government. They know, and they want every chance possible to check the power of the federal government. And so when they give the government power, they know they're doing it, to the best. They're doing it in a safe way. Yeah.
How was Harding's decided?
Let's see. Okay. Question: is a dog sniff at the front door of a suspected grow house by a trained narcotics dog a Fourth Amendment search requiring probable cause? Conclusion: yes. Justice Antoine Scalia, again, the court held that the front porch of a home is part of the home itself for the Fourth Amendment purposes. Typically, ordinary citizens are invited to enter onto the porch. He used a really brilliant argument from history, a common man argument. When you invite somebody, back then, you're like, hey man, come up onto the porch. People sit out on their porch. Families are invited onto the porch of a house as a gesture of welcome. He used that argument from history. It's common man. Everybody loves it. The government hates it. Typically, there we go. To either explicitly or implicitly to communicate with the house's occupants. Police officers, however, cannot go beyond the scope of that invitation. So he would argue that police officers have to be invited onto the porch of a house in order for them to search that porch. All right. So I think this slide might be jacked up. Let's see. There we go. So yeah, basically, what's the fastest way to reach Obama? Save an email to your drafts folder. Some people legitimately argue that that's the fastest way to reach a government agent, is to save an email to your drafts folder. And that could or could not be true. We have no idea. Why? Because Edward Snowden is sitting on top of a 7-terabyte hard drive that he won't release to anybody. Darn it! If he's going to be an American hero, then actually complete being an American hero. Go the whole length. All right. Any questions on this massive monolith of information that probably left you somewhat confused? No. Good. Okay, that means I did my job.